my, a good part of my career, really most of it was spent in the area of adoptions. And when I retired from CPS in December of 2018, I had been a program director with conservatorship for quite a while. So anyway, so what I want to do today is talk to you about the adoption process. And I do have a PowerPoint. Now, Lauren was talking about our technology. I am not a technology guru, so I'm going to try to share my screen, and hopefully I have a PowerPoint that I'm going to show you. I'm not going to go through the whole PowerPoint because it's one that we use in training for our staff, and it really has more than you want. But there are certain areas of it that I think would be helpful for you to see. So I'm going to try to share my screen. And if any of you are technology gurus, you may have to give me instructions. So we're going to try here.
While she's doing that, can y'all hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
I do not know what happened. I am so sorry, and nothing was working. So anyway.
You're back.
Worked fine for staff meeting this morning, so who knows what's going on.
Okay. This is what I'm trying to share. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So what this is a PowerPoint that takes us from the termination of the case to consummation of the adoption. So there are particular slides I want to show you. So the first one here is showing the general progression of an adoption case. So you start with the termination of parental rights. It says under here, there's a 90-day appeal period. That's not exactly accurate. There is a 90-day period of time that we have to wait following termination in order to do an adoption. But that 90-day time is to allow for any intervention by relatives that may come forward seeking conservatorship of the children. So it's not really an appeal time, but it's to allow for the possibility of relatives coming forward. The actual appeal time for any of the cases is 30 days. So then the next thing, once we have termination of parental rights, is then identifying an adoptive family, then moving to the preparation of the case for adoption. And that includes the adoption subsidy that we will be talking a little bit more about in a few minutes. Then once you prepare the case and get everything ready, then doing the adoptive placement. Then there's post-placement supervision after that, followed by the adoption consummation and the closure of the case. So that is just the general flow of the adoption case. So we'll go into it a little bit more in particular in just a minute. So the next slide is when the permanency goal changes. So as I'm sure you're all aware, when we first get a case in the system, almost like 99.9% of the time, the first plan, the first goal is family reunification. So then when that changes, when it becomes clear that that the child cannot be returned to the parents, then the goal needs to be changed. And when the goal needs to be changed, the worker, the caseworker for the child needs to go into the case and do a new plan of service. So the goals may be adoption by a relative or fictive kin, adoption by someone unrelated, or PMC to relative or kin, or PMC to someone unrelated. So, but prior to termination of parental rights, the new permanency goals should be discussed with the child, and of course, a new plan of service. Also, if you will note, there's a sentence here at the bottom that says, be sure to discuss the permanency goal change with all invested parties, attorney, guardian ad litem, Casa, caregivers, and the child, if appropriate at that time. So actually, Casa, if there is a Casa on the case, then you need to be informed when the goal changes. And the goal we're going to be talking about today is the goal of adoption. So then moving to the next slide. So there are different kinds of adoption. So there is the matched adoption. And the matched adoption is when there are no immediate family members available that are interested in the child, no fictive kin, no foster family that is wanting to adopt the child. So what we have to do then is to recruit for a family for that child. So one of the questions that had been presented to me that y'all wanted an answer to was whether the PCM changes when the goal changes to adoption, and they do not. The 2Ingage philosophy is that a child can reach permanency faster by having the same worker throughout the case. And that's the ideal. The ideal is to have the same worker throughout the case. You and I know that doesn't always happen because of the turnover and such with the agency. But the ideal would be for one worker to have the case throughout. So the PCM does not change when the goal changes to adoption. So the first kind of adoption that we discussed here is the matched adoption. And then the other is if there are a relative or fictive kin that does not have that that has a relationship with the child. If the child is not placed in their home, if the child is not, this includes the ICPC cases. This includes, those kinds of cases. But that's where the child, somebody's been identified, but the child is not yet in the home. So in those two, the ones that are on your left side of your screen, those adoptions require post-placement supervision for 6 months before the adoption consummation can occur. So the 6-month period of time that you hear about that a child has to be in the home is actually a residency requirement, so that the child has to be in the home for 6 months. The other kind of adoption is that the child is being adopted by the current caregiver. And that is, let's see, I can't see my screen here. It's the relative or fictive kin or the foster parent. So with any of those kinds of adoptions, if the child has been in the home for a period of 6 months, when the child becomes available for adoption, we can do that adoption as quickly as everything can be done in the case to get all the paperwork done and all of the legal stuff done. So just as soon as the child can, we can get everything done. So you've got where the child's not in the home currently, or then when the child is in the home currently. So also for the matched adoptions, I want to talk to you a little bit about what the matched adoptions are. And those are ones that you guys really are involved in. So that if a child is not in there, if adoption is the plan and the child is not in his or her intended to be permanent placement, then we are required to register that child on the TARE and to recruit for the child. So what happens is that the PCM, there's a form, a registration form, and they have to take a really good, clear picture of the child. We used to have heart gallery photos. We really don't have that at present time. But if we did, those are the desirable ones. But they send a picture, they send the form that gives information about the child and the type of family that is desired for that particular child. So we get the child registered on the TARE, and then the inquiries that come in through the TARE are handled by the adoption specialist. I will tell you that at the current time, we've only had 2 adoption specialists that handle all of the matching and all of the inquiries. We've already hired 2 new adoption specialists. One of them is quickly going to be able to take over some of that duty, Vanessa Gott. So she doesn't have any cases that have come over from handling permanency cases, but Ashley Martin is the other one. that is coming to be an adoption specialist, and she really will not be able to do those duties for a while because she still has a caseload. As soon as she can get those all transferred, then she will become an adoption specialist. And all of these duties will be divided among these 4 people. And it also in phase 2, the jobs and tasks and responsibilities of the adoption specialist have grown. So we really did need some extra staff. So with a matched adoption, first of all, you've got the TARE registration, you've got the inquiries that are coming in, and the adoption specialist will request home studies. For those inquiries that look like they could be possibility, then we request a home study. Now, sometimes on the TARE, home studies are already there. They submit them at the time of the inquiry. So we can go in and look at the home study. And then the adoption specialist is going to be screening those and then send some of them to the PCM. And then after there are some that are identified as really real possibilities, we do what we call an inquiry screening call with the potential family and their case manager. And that is, and we include the PCM, their supervisor, the adoption specialist supervisor. It's strictly an in-house call with the agency and the parent to explain a little bit more about the child, diagnoses, behaviors, number of placements, that kind of thing, to let them know whether they really want to pursue and continue to be considered for this particular child. If after that screening call, they do wish to be considered, and if we feel like there's still a potential possibility for the child, then they can be among the ones considered for a selection staffing. So what will happen when we get are looking at a selection staffing for the child is that the home studies will be sent to all of the parties. The Casa will get a copy of all of the home studies that are going to be considered. The attorney ad litem, the case manager, where the child is placed, all of those people, and therapist, if we have a therapist, the interested parties, the ones who do not get a copy of the home study are the current caregivers. Now their case manager will get a copy of it, but they will not. So you will get to read the home studies that are being considered. And so once we do then a selection staffing, hopefully we can do a selection staffing if we just have one. But we do, even with just one, we do the selection staffing. And then let's say we have 3 families to look at. So we at the end of the selection staffing, we talk, the case managers for the families are off the call by then. And we talk about the strengths and concerns that we might see in each of the families. And then we come to a consensus on which might be the family that can best meet the needs of the child. And what we're looking for is not who's the best family, but the family that can best meet the needs of the child. So a family then hopefully can be selected. And if we have had the luxury of several families to look at, then hopefully we can do an alternate selection. So let's say the first family doesn't work out, then we can move to the alternate selection. So once we do the selection staffing and we select the family, we give the caseworker and the supervisor a little time to mull it over and let us know for sure by the next day if that is their definite choice to pursue for this child. If it is, then we notify everybody that that is the case. And then the selected family, actually it's their case manager. Their case manager is sent the redacted file. Now this is where a lot of times we face some problems because sometimes the redactions are not back. So we have to wait for the redaction. So we have to get the redacted file to the family. They have to read the whole thing. And so after they read the file, then they let us know if they are still interested. They have to take at least 72 hours to read the file. They can have as much time as they need. but at least that long to read and consider and discuss whether they're interested in pursuing this child. And I have to tell you that this is where a lot of the adoption selections break down, because once they can hear, they can see the picture of this really cute kid, and they can hear, you know, from all of the caregivers and the caseworkers about the positives of the child. Now they hear the negative as well, but they hear all of these good things also about the child. Then when they get the case record and they read everything, sometimes it's scary, because some of our kids, as you very well know, do not read well. Their files just do not read well. So sometimes that's where families back out. But if they read the case file and they say, yes, they are still interested, then we arrange for a presentation staffing. And the presentation staffing includes all of the same people that the selection staffing included, plus the adoptive family. So we go through the more particular thing or more specific things about the child. And that's also where you as the Casa can be very helpful in explaining to the adoptive parents what you see in this child, what you've seen with the behaviors and maybe the growth and the changes that you've seen in this child. But at the presentation staffing, all of these things are presented, plus just the day-to-day things, what it will take to parent this child, what their daily routine is, how they're doing in school, what school they'll be attending, you know, all of those specific kinds of things. And then also we set up kind of a preliminary plan for pre-placement visits. And what we're doing now, and it's been so difficult for these kinds of things during the COVID era, because of, you know, used to, we could just go ahead and schedule some face-to-face kind of things, but this has been difficult. So what we've been doing is that the first contact between the adoptive family and the child has been like FaceTime or something, or Zoom or something where they can each see each other, but it's not actually in person. So they may do, you know, they may do several of those and then move to actual face-to-face visits where the family goes to where the child is. And then before the child can be placed in the home, the child definitely does have to go visit the adoptive family's home, have to spend at least one overnight there. Usually it's more than that, like a weekend or so. But we do arrange during the presentation staffing, we do like a preliminary pre-placement plan, explain to the family kind of how it goes and see if they have any questions. And then up to that point, this child should not know anything about the family. So once we've had the presentation staffing, then we give the family another 24 hours to consider and discuss whether they really want to pursue this. And if they do, then at that time, we notify everybody that it's a go with this family, and then the child should be told about the family. During the presentation staffing, we also ask the family if they have a family album or some sort of a picture book or something that we can share with the child about them and their family. And most of them do. Most of them already have one put together. But then we ask them to send that to the worker, or sometimes if the child is someplace that we feel comfortable in them sending it to the caregiver, then we will do that so that the child has it to look at. But and it's just real important that up until that point, the child not know anything about the family, because as we said, there's any part of that time frame that we just talked about, the family could change their mind. And we do not want the child to have to go through that of thinking that there's a family and then all of a sudden, no, they've changed their mind. So they should not be told. That you are included for sure in the selection staffings and the presentation staffings. Are there any questions about that? No? Okay. Okay, then the next slide is, I just explained that there's a 90-day, it's not really an appeal time, but it is a time where relatives can intervene. So we have to wait at least 90 days following the termination to be able to place the child with an adoptive family. So we discuss with the caregiver, and the parental rights are terminated and the plans to progress in the adoption process. If the child is in a home where the family has expressed an interest to adopt, they can sign the intent to adopt. So it is documented in the case record. And the goal of adoption is discussed with the child. And so we can, let's say that if we have not identified a family, but all during that 90-day appeal time, we can continue to prepare, we can continue to recruit, we can do any of the pieces of the adoption process. We just can't do the adoption. Also, after parental rights are terminated, we really do, best practice would be to schedule a goodbye visit between the child and the parents. And there are, various people can be present at that visit if necessary. But a goodbye visit really is important if it can be arranged, because it provides some closure for the child. And if the birth parents can be guided to do what they really need to do, they will be giving their emotional permission for that child to move on and be happy with another family. So that would be the goal of the closure for the child and the family, and for them to be able to have that permission from the family to move on forward. Okay, then the next slide is an identifying the adoptive family. During this, the current caregiver is not going to be the adoptive family, but the adoptive family has been selected. Then we work with them and the child. There are visits that the worker has to be doing with the child. We have to ensure that we've got the birth certificate or the BVS for each child. And if not, it has to be requested. They have to request that the case file be redacted. And that is a real process. They have to get, the PCM has to get that record, the entire case binder. And if you've all seen them, sometimes very large case files have to be scanned into our records department. And then the records department has to get some other things together through that are in the 2Ingage computer system. They have to get all of that together and send it to records management in DFPS at the state office. So they are the ones who actually do the redactions for the cases. And determine if the adoptive family is licensed to adopt. And this is something that's really, can be really important, because we might have the child placed in a foster family. And so we go forward knowing, of course, they are licensed. However, if their license is for foster care only, then we have to request that the agency do an adoption study. So just being licensed as a foster home does not qualify them for adoption. So we have to request an adoption study. We have to request a HESIG to be completed for each child. The HESIG is a health, social, educational, and genetic history. And I am the person with 2Ingage that manages that particular thing. All of the HESIG requests go first through our care management to determine everything's there. Then they come to me, and I keep a pending file of those that have been sent to me, but until the external case file has been ready to send to our provider, I cannot send the referral on. So I do a tracking of the HESIGs. And what our provider for HESIGs is CK Family Services. So as soon as the case file is ready to go, the external case file is ready to go, unredacted. This is not the redacted file. This is completely unredacted file, has to go to CK Family Services. What's included in the HESIG referral is they have two forms. I'm sorry, that phone is in the background. There are two forms they have to complete. One of the forms gives all of the people that the provider can contact in order to get information about for the HESIG. The other is basically the referral form, giving the case number, identifying all the identifying kinds of information. Plus, they have to give include all of the impact narrative that come from all stages of service, from the investigation stage, the FSU stage, and the subcare stage. All of those narratives have to be included in that request. So I track the HESIGs. As soon as the external case file is ready to go, I send the referral to CK. Now for once they get the referral, once our provider gets that HESIG referral, they have several days to process it, about 3 days, say, to process it. And they assign it to like their whoever they are using to do their home studies. If it is just a regular HESIG referral, they have about 20 days to complete the HESIG once they have processed the referral. If we ask for an expedited HESIG referral, if we ask for an expedited HESIG, they have 15 days to get it back to us. So then I track those. I have dates of when they're sent to, I have dates of when I receive them, when I send them to CK, and then when I get them back. And then when I get them back, I just make sure that the worker and the supervisor have that information. The HESIG is required in order to complete the adoption. The adoptive family has to get the HESIG, and the HESIG has to be filed in court at the time of the adoption consummation. There are some exceptions to that. If the child is being adopted by a grandparent, a step parent, or aunt or uncle by birth, by prior adoption, that that they can, anyway, aunt and uncle can be, they can waive. Aunt, uncle, grandparent, step parent. If the child is being adopted by any of those people, we can get the HESIG waived. What we do is ask the family if they are willing to have it waived. And if so, then it can be waived, and that is reported to the court. But otherwise, all of the rest of them, the HESIG that has to have been initialed on each page by the adoptive family and signed, that particular HESIG or a copy of it has to be filed in the court at the time of the adoption. And then the worker must complete a minimum of 3 adoption preparation visits with the child, not necessarily with the adoptive family. If the adoptive family is the current caregiver, yes. But if the adoptive family is not the current caregiver, then that is not necessary. So the redaction, the practice should be that the redaction should be requested within 20 days after the parental rights are terminated. The HESIG should be requested within 45 days of the parental rights being terminated. I can tell you those dates we're not meeting those dates. Every once in a while there is one, but what has happened with a lot, they've inherited cases that was not done. And so then they are having to backtrack and do that. Are there any questions about that particular process?
I have a question.
Okay.
Is there any like negative side for a kinship placement who's wanting to adopt to waive that? You said HESIG, I think.
Most of the time, that if it's a relative, they know the information that's presented that goes in the HESIG. But if it's a relative that has not been really closely involved with the family, it would probably be a good idea for them to get the HESIG, because what the HESIG does really is it goes through, it gives like the family history, things with aunts, uncles, grandparents. It gives a lot of that information. So if they are not really familiar with the family, if they haven't been very close, am I echoing? Sounds like I am. At any rate, that would be something that they might not want to waive it if they really don't have a lot of that information. Does that answer your question? Okay. Okay, then. Okay, I want to move to one of the major things in preparing the case for adoption is if the child qualifies for subsidy, and that is getting the subsidy packet done. Are you all still able to hear me still? Yes, okay. All right, these, I wanted you to see all of the things that qualifies a child for adoption assistance or adoption subsidy. First of all, the child has to be younger than 18, of course. We place children for adoption all the way up to the age of 18, but once they reach age 18, they're considered an adult and we can no longer do an adoption. The family could do an adoption, an adult adoption, but we cannot do the placement for adoption. So younger than 18 and then meet these requirements. The first is that the child, if it's an Anglo child, they have to be at least 6 years of age. If the child is at least 2 years of age or older and a member of a racial or ethnic group that exists, that exits foster care at a higher, lower pace than other racial or ethnic groups. Basically, if the child is anything other than Anglo, they can meet that requirement of being 2 years old or older. Even if a child, if they're half Hispanic, or if they're half Asian or half Black or whatever, they can meet that requirement. But a Caucasian, full Anglo-American child has to be at least 6 years of age or older. And then a minority child can be 2 years of age or older. If the child is being adopted with a sibling or to join a sibling, and that's a really important thing, because if you have two children, regardless of their age, if they're going to be placed together, they're going to qualify for subsidy. If this child, if the family that is adopting the child already has a sibling, if they have PMC of the sibling, or if they have adopted the sibling, if they have legal custody of a child that is a sibling to the child we are placing, then this child will qualify for subsidy regardless of what their age is. Now, there are things that we have to present in the subsidy packet proving that there's the sibling relationship. But if they're joining a sibling, they qualify. Or if the child has a verifiable physical, mental, or emotional disabling condition. But that has to be a diagnosis by a physician, and it has to be addressed and say that it is disabling. We have it's not a form, but we do have the actual wording that the doctor needs to use if they are going to say that this child has a disabling condition. And one of the requirements is that a reasonable effort must be made to find an adoptive placement without providing adoption assistance, or that's unless it's not in the child's best interest. Really and truly, if we have the child on tear, or if the child has been, let's say the child has been, if the child's on the tear, it meets that criteria, or if the child has been in a home for a long period of time and they are going to be adopting, that meets the best interest part. We would not want to move that child in order to just get someone that doesn't need a subsidy. Or if the child is getting SSI, they can also be qualified to receive subsidy. Are there any questions about those requirements? So as you see, most of our kids are eligible for adoption assistance. Not all. There are a few who are not, but most of them are. If they are not eligible, there's nothing, there's no application that needs to be done. But if the child, if the worker knows for sure the child does not qualify, they don't need to do an application. But if they meet any of these requirements, they do a subsidy application. The subsidy packet, it's sent to the adoptive family, and they have to complete several pages of it. There's things about their income and their history and such. So there's an entire packet, though, that the PCM has to put together to send in to get a subsidy. Now, I know that if any of you have been involved with Casa for a very, very long period of time, you hear discussions about how long the subsidy thing takes and how many problems we have getting the subsidy approved and all. So what happens is there is a packet, there's a checklist that has to be reviewed by the supervisor and signed to say that everything is in the packet. But sometimes they just miss some things that need to be in the packet. But the eligibility specialist, actually the eligibility specialists are with DFPS. And so we have to get the subsidy packets together and submit to the eligibility specialist, who require that that packet be to them at least 30 days before the adoptive placement. And in order for that to happen, we have asked that the PCM get the subsidy packet to me, to the adoption mailbox, 45 days before the adoptive placement. So what happens is I assign one of the adoption specialists to review the packet. Most of the time, it still requires something. It requires something that they have neglected to put in or don't understand or whatever. But we have to then request that they send the additional information. So that 45 days to us gives us time to request the additional information and get it back and make sure that we have a complete subsidy packet to send to eligibility. Because if it's not complete, they won't even work with it. So it has to be a complete packet. And there's quite a bit that does go into that packet. One of which they have to have a current home study for the family, and it definitely has to be within a year. It also has to definitely say that they're approved for the age range that that child is in, and that it's just everything. There's a lot to it. So there are times that Casa might be of help. And if you have been involved at all with the caregiver that's going to adopt, it may be something that you could assist with in helping them get to put together what they need to for the subsidy packet. Or if the caseworker has some things that might need to be obtained, it's possible that Casa could be useful in helping with some of that.
Beverly,
Are there
is
any
the
questions
subsidy
about-
a set amount?
Well, whenever the eligibility specialist determines that the child is eligible, then they send it on to the adoption negotiator, the adoption assistance negotiator. She then contacts the family and they negotiate the amount of the subsidy. Most of the time they get the full amount, unless they have just, unless they just have a very high income and can't prove that they have any needs, then most of the time they do get the maximum. The maximum for a basic level child is $400. The maximum for a moderate or above level child is 545. And though, I mean, those are actually the high, those are the maximum. So that's, and the thing is, if a family has been a foster home for the child, if they've been licensed as a foster home and have had that child in their home for a period of time, they're getting considerably more than that. So sometimes that has been an issue with families moving from foster care to adoption, because once we do the adoptive placement, then the foster care stops. Adoption assistance, however, can begin the first of the month following the month of placement. There's sometimes some confusion over that, but it has nothing to do with the consummation of the adoption. The subsidy begins the first of the month following placement. So what we try to do most of the time is, if this is a placement, toward the end of the month. That way they get their foster care for the pretty much the full, close to the full month, and then their subsidy starts the first of the following month. And subsidy checks are not like foster care. Foster care is considered a reimbursement, but the subsidy or adoption assistance it's more like child support. It comes that month for that month, so it is not considered a reimbursement. So
And how long does the subsidy continue?
Till they're 18 years of age. Now there are some exceptions to that as well. If the child that's being adopted is over the age of extended subsidy to last, I mean, it can be extended all the way up to age 21, but the child has to be older. Otherwise, it's, I mean, I have to be at least 16 or older. Otherwise, it's up to the age of 18. And I know that that has sometimes been an issue with families whose kids are kind of behind in school. So they turn 18 before they get out of school. And that has been an issue, but it's just the program. It's there until they're 18 years of age.
Thank you.
And let's see, I was going to show, okay, slide 13. These are the subsidy benefits. And so all children receive the tuition. So if they are adopted through us, whether they get subsidy or not, or if a family other than the parents, other than the birth parents, get PMC of the child, then they are all eligible for the college tuition and fee waivers. But with the subsidy, there's a monetary payment, and we just talked about that until the child's 18, and that is a maximum of $400 for basic, or up to $545 for the moderate or above. It also includes Medicaid coverage through the month of their 18th birthday. And then post-adopt services. Now, post-adopt services that are provided through Centers for Children and Families, post-adopt services actually are also for anybody that adopts, period. If the child's adopted through our agency, they're eligible for post-adopt services. They do not have to have received the subsidy. Another subsidy benefit is up to $1,200 in non-recurring expenses. And that can be more than attorney fees, but most of the time that is used for paying for the family's attorney for the adoption. So then of course we talked about the tuition and fee waiver. They do continue to get that. I mean, they get that. Are there any questions about that? Let's see what is down here. Oh yeah, and if a child is 16 years of age or older at the time of their eligibility determination, they can provide extended benefits up to the age of 21, and Medicaid through the 21st birthday, but that's only if they're 16 or older. Any questions about the benefits?
I put that in the chat. Are the 400 and the 545 figures given, are those monthly amounts, or I kind of got lost on that part?
It is monthly.
Okay. And then if a child is placed, like from the beginning of their case with the family that is later than going to adopt, does the family receive subsidy retroactively once the adoption occurs for the amount of time that the child is placed, or is it not until after that adoption?
No, the adoption assistance only begins the first of the month following the official placement for adoption. So, if a child's been there for foster care, then we do the adoptive placement on that day then, or the first of the month following that day that the placement date was changed, they become eligible for subsidy. If they were not receiving anything, or if they were receiving kinship funds, they stop as well. Or if they weren't receiving anything at all, there's nothing retroactive. Nothing goes back any farther. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
And let's see, I was going to show, because we talked about the subsidy, the life of the subsidy packet. This, I just was showing you this because it's such an important part of the process. And they cannot do the placement until our consummation. They cannot do that until the subsidy is negotiated. And the reason is, if all of that's done prior to subsidy being negotiated, then they're not ever eligible for it. So it has to be done prior to the adoption. So the life of the packet is that give the subsidy packet to the family, then collect the information, put the subsidy packet together, provide the completed packet for the supervisor, and then they submit the packet to us. And then once it is sent on to the eligibility specialist, they then have to they can email us the subsidy packet for us to review, but then they have to mail the original packet to the eligibility specialist. The eligibility specialist does their stuff, and then they turn it over to the adoption negotiator, and then she then contacts the family and negotiates. And that term is they use the term negotiate, but it's not a major negotiation. If they really need the assistance, they get it. And usually, I mean, their income isn't totally considered. I mean, it's most families get the maximum. I had an adoptive parent call me this last week saying that now that their child was in high school, could they get more money for their adoption assistance? And no, they're set amounts, and it doesn't ever change. There are some there. I know one of the things that we had talked about before was, ways that Casa could help in these cases. And one of the ways would be to help us get a good picture. Sometimes the workers and the PCMs for the child do pictures, but sometimes they're just not good, clear pictures for us to use for TARE. And a good picture is very important. And if you have a relationship with the adoptive parents, you can assist with the subsidy packets. One of the things that we say we do for the children and rarely do is a life book. And a life book is, it's not just a photo album. It's like the story of the child's life, but it does include photos and keepsakes and that kind of thing. And that might be something that Casa could really be beneficial in doing, is helping with life books for children. Another thing is that on the HESIGs, whenever say we've had a HESIG done way a long time ago, and now we're ready to do the adoption, the HESIG has to be updated. there may be some help that you can do in updating, because updates to the HESIG really are only about the current information on the child. So there are ways that you might can help with that as well. Are there any questions that you have? I don't know how well you've been able to hear me, because every once in a while my screen pops up and says you have an unstable connection. So I don't know how well you've been able to hear me. So
Beverly, this is
Any-
Vanessa. Can you hear
Okay.
me? I just really
Yes,
quick.
I
I
can.
had, because I know last week when we were staffing some of the cases that we got from the list from Casa, one of the things that we saw was the subsidy packet not being submitted because of the waiting for an adoption date. And I just wanted to clarify, that's because if an adoption date is not set and it goes over the 30 days, we would have to redo the packet again. Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct. If it's been over 90, actually it's 90 days
90 days.
for
Okay.
well, yeah, the 30 days is what they need before they need that much time. They need, the eligibility specialist needs the complete packet 30 days. I did 30 days before placement. I did have a question yesterday from one of the child placing agencies that are saying they were being told that in order to submit a subsidy packet, the worker was having to get a consummation date. But that is not true. That is not true. They do have to have a planned placement date before submitting the packet. Now, what happens sometimes is if it's a current caregiver, particularly a foster home, and they're getting the foster care, a lot of times what they're doing is doing the placement and the consummation on the same day. In those cases, yes, you would have to have a consummation date, but you do not have to have a consummation date to submit a subsidy packet. You just need the planned placement date.
Beverly, we did
Also,
have a couple. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We
no,
had
go ahead.
a couple of questions. One of our advocates was asking, can we see what a sample subsidy packet looks like so that we know what the families are having to do in case you, or is that something that we just see once it's complete, or do we never see that?
Well, what I can do is send you and tell me who to send it to, or do you want me to send it to that Casa Supervisor address email?
That's fine. You can send it to that, or you can send it to me, either one. One of our advocates was just curious because her case is going to be headed to adoption. So I think she just wanted to know what the guardians or, what the prospective families having to fill out and that kind of thing.
Okay, what I can send you is a checklist that shows everything that has to go in the packet. I don't know, Vanessa, do you have what a family has to fill out? Do you have a copy of that?
I do. Yes, ma'am. I can send that to the Casa Supervisor email.
Yeah. If you would like to see what the family has to fill out, it's not, it's not confidential information. Well, it is once they fill it out,
Right.
but just the form is fine for you to have that if you'd like to see what all they have to do.
And then the other question goes back to the timeline of that if Anglo children must be 6 years old, but if depending on their race and ethnicity, that 2 years of age.
Yes.
The question, the statement was, I can make assumptions why that difference exists, but could you explain what the reason is for that rule?
Well, the reason, really initially, the reason it was made is that those children children that are of a minority race tend to stay in placement longer than Anglo children. So the idea is to be able to find them a family, get them out of the system. And so, and originally it was a little hard to sometimes get them to fit in those categories, but now even if the child went on the, in impact on the child characteristics and things, if a child is even part, like if one parent is Hispanic and one parent is Anglo, they'll qualify for that, being 2 years of age or older. So they're considered minority at that point.
Okay, good.
Any
Other
other
questions?
questions?
Yeah. Beverly, while we're waiting to see if there's any more questions, could I get you to pick me a couple of numbers for door prizes? And it's just any number between 1 and 27.
17.
All right. That is Miss Deb Methvin. Deb, I think she's still on here. She will get a door prize and it'll be in the hallway at our office. And if you could pick up one more for me.
3.
David Baum. David's our lucky one. He kind of has a tendency to get to win pretty often. So we will have door prizes waiting for David and Deb in our office. Are there other questions? Beverly, did you get to cover everything or did you still have a little bit more?
No, I think pretty much of what I really wanted to cover. So, and you just asked questions. So if there are any other questions, and later on, if you think of something, I wish I'd have thought of that, I wish I'd have asked, just let me know. I'll be glad to answer it for you.
And I wanted to clarify that if a child's in a placement that decides to adopt and they're licensed to adopt, the countdown, the time that they've been in that home would count, correct? They wouldn't have to wait 6 more months. So if they've been there.
Right.
Okay, good.
The 6 months is a residency requirement.
Okay.
So the amount of time that the child is in the home counts, but it doesn't matter whether it was a relative placement, a foster placement, or an adoptive placement, just so long as the child's been in the home 6 months.
Good.
Yeah.
Guys, anything else?
No?
Nobody's speaking up. So you did a great job.
Oh, well, thank you. Casa is such an important part of our program, so I'm glad to be able to speak with you.
Well, I've really enjoyed it. I've had 3 cases go to adoption, and so that's kind of a high number for me, but I mean, for one advocate to have had that many adoptions, and each time it's been a little bit different. And so I just really appreciate you taking the time. I know this is a work in progress, and that you know, the partnership, we're still hammering some things out because it looked different when it switched to 2Ingage. So thank you for being willing to come in and help us. Guys, if there's anything else, please put it in the chat box. I don't know if Lauren said this at the beginning, but in 2 weeks, we're going to be working on genograms with Kathy Giebler, our supervisor. And so I'll be sending that email out to you. But that's an important part that can play a significant role in adoption process, identifying family members, and whether it's kinship, family, or whether we identify some fictive kinship. So that'll be a really informative tool for you to have. But we really appreciate our partnership with you guys, Beverly. Thank you so much for coming today. Everyone give her a round of applause, thumbs up, or whatever.
Thank you very much.
Well, we appreciate you very much, Beverly. Thank you for coming. And guys, if there's more materials that Beverly might have to share, I'll get those out to you. If you have questions that were not addressed, feel free to email and I can make sure those get to her. But that will conclude our training today, unless anyone has any other questions.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Beverly. We appreciate you.
Thank you.